Yeah, you can hear me okay. First, I just want to thank Yorinda, Jort, Nikos, Euro, and Visca. And I want to call Nikos the logistician. This is the person who's sitting at the front, who's making all the magic happen and all the logistics work. And Daniela, thank you so much for that introduction. I hope I can deliver what she seems to suggest I'm promising here, but we'll see. So I'm going to introduce you to this new work I'm doing, which is called Feminism of the Broken Machine. And just at the outset, I'll say it comes out of a frustration. I'm a media studies professor who teaches technology and gender, but it comes out of a sort of frustration of how to understand the relationship between technology and gender, and also what the political possibilities are for feminism in a world where there's no technological solution to patriarchy. So I'm trying to shift some of the ways in which we think of tech and gender and move to this idea of the technological. Like, how can feminism sort of apprehend the technological as a mode of resistance? And that actually means navigating this sort of tech world we currently live in and what it offers. So that's what I'm going to be going through until I get you to this idea of the broken machine. And I'm not going to break anything, I promise. Things were broken yesterday, but I have nothing to break. Actually, I'm up here with a broken wrist, so we'll see how, and this is not a performance either, but we'll see what happens here. So I just want to start by saying, and also my images are not that inspiring. It's just to give you something else to look at other than me if you get bored. So I recognize they're not amazing. But let's start here. So sexism at insert your favorite tech company is no longer a surprising or even newsworthy headline. And so rather than focus on tech's all too obvious gender problem, I want to suggest we focus instead on gender's tech problem. So instead of tech's gender problem, how about gender's tech problem? For example, have you ever noticed how so many of the poster boys for the far right seem to be pseudo-media theorists with specialties in gender and technology too? And I think we probably have different cultural figures that appear when I think of like a right-wing troll or somebody on the right. I mean, I'm going to give you my culturally specific examples, and some of them are becoming more and more universal and generalizable. But one of the first is James Damore. In the summer of 2017, former Google employee James Damore made headlines when his company-wide Google diversity memo leaked. In it, he argued that biological differences between men and women make diversity-based hiring in the tech sector problematic. So Damore was concerned that equal representation was going to be bad for Google's business and the future of software engineering in general. And so these are just two, the memo has a bunch, some of you have probably seen it already, or many of you have, but these are just two of the examples that he uses right here. To explain why tech is probably, tech as it is, Google specifically, is better off as it is with the current state of gender representation in that industry. And then I have a very specific example. Infamous psychology professor at the University of Toronto, Jordan Peterson, has garnered an alt-right cult following on both Twitter and YouTube. And he takes readily to these platforms to share his thoughts on the dangers of feminism, gender-neutral pronouns, and the benefits of patriarchy, and now an all-beef diet. And I've started to wonder if these things go together, like patriarchy and an all-beef diet. And I'm not joking. This is absolutely true. But Peterson theorizes on a relationship between gender and technology to explain why his following is largely composed of young men. So here, I mean, this is some amazing media theory. It's an astounding platform, a Gutenberg revolution as far as I'm concerned. It's expanded my audience to a degree that is almost unfathomable. I convey very large volumes of very philosophically interesting and practically useful information. You see that men are higher interest in ideas and women higher interest in aesthetics. And then we have Milo Yiannopoulos. I wonder if you're familiar with it. Yes? Familiar with this person. He was a once exalted poster child for the alt-right who was given, and this is super interesting to me, he was given the title of tech editor and technologist at Breitbart without any tech training or experience. So I also love this idea of how he was just a man online with a lot of opinions about women, and this translated into the title of tech editor. I apologize for this image. Meanwhile, on the world's political stage, the grab them by their pussy president is prone to wax poetic about the power of Twitter. He he attributes the, quote, tremendous platform to his election win. His strategy for world domination is simple, and this is a direct quote. Quote, when somebody says something about me, I'm going to just go bing, 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 and I take care of it, unquote. The correlation between misogyny, imperialism, and technological power grabs is not a hard one to make. A cultural history of fathers and their dominance over the television remote control has already been written. This is work by Lynn Spiegel. And more recently, smart home technologies appear at the forefront of domestic abuse cases as a new weapons of gender domination and control. So this includes not only tracking partners' movements through home surveillance technologies, but also controlling environmental conditions against the other's will. For example, heat, lighting, and lock mechanisms. So gender's tech problem demands a feminism that can inhabit the technologics of power in this broken system. So I'm going to bore you with a little bit of media theory to set the stage for this, because I want us to understand what I mean here by the technologics of power and what it would mean to inhabit the technologics of power. And it means having a sort of sensibility and understanding of the power of technology. So as a feminist media studies professor, it might seem like an odd starting point, but I begin each semester explaining to my students the relationship between technology and power through Canadian media theorist Harold Adams-Innes. Thank you. And this is somebody who's written about railways, the beaver trade, fur trade, beaver roots. So it might seem like a strange way to begin, but in The Bias of Communication in 1951, Innes connected the rise and fall of empires to the properties of a given culture's dominating media forms. So an empire needed to be able to extend its power across vast distances, space, and also endure over time, what we call history. So Innes compared empires and their different technologies. So he would talk about stone and clay and tablets and the properties, the actual material properties of parchment and paper. But the digital context brings us tweets and web pages, blogs, YouTube channels, Reddit and 4chan and what have you. But the crux of this theory, and it applies to this context still, is that power is derived not from the content of the media, but from a technology, space, or time binding capacities. And so we know Innes was the intellectual predecessor to McLuhan, whose well-known dictum, "The medium is the message," argued that the true message of any medium is a change in pace, pattern, and scale that it introduced into human affairs. So for example, the message of the light bulb was the radical social and economic transformation that ensued when the definitional and experiential boundaries of day and night shifted with the light-filled room. And so McLuhan uses this concept, technologies are extensions of man. So the wheel is an extension, I'm sorry for this media theory 101, but it'll help us get on the same page here. The wheel is an extension of the foot. If we think of curtains, they're extensions of our eyelids. And a glass like this would be a storage medium, an extension of a cup filled with water. And so for both McLuhan and Innes, technologies set the parameters and political possibilities of what is possible. And I think this is a question that we need to ask from a feminist perspective. What are the parameters of possibility within this larger technologic? And I would also suggest, this is right after Elon Musk went off to Mars, he tweeted this photo of McLuhan, and there's this sort of weird relationship here, and you wonder if this was like a galactic extension of man or what was actually going on in this situation. But I do want to say that there's something going on here. All of these trolls, these peons turned pundits and presidents by way of having access to Wi-Fi clearly do recognize something about the technologics of power, about the imperial space-binding power of digital technology. And these alt-right figures, misogynist tech bros, proliferators of horrific working conditions, masculinists with universal but also miniature theories of media, recognize the technological as a form of power. And so it seems that everyone else has a good handle on the idea that the medium is the message, as a technological strategy to maintain patriarchy, white ethno-nationalism, and also the perpetuation of class inequality. So what strikes me worthy of serious pause is that these figures operate with a perspective on technology that also explains the way they conceive of gender and other forms of social difference. So it's the same understanding, like the way technology is theorized is similar to the way racialized others and gender is imagined in this discourse. So we can start with McLuhan here. This is an incredible quote. Man becomes, as it were, the sex organs of the machine world, as the bee of the plant world, enabling it to fecundate and to evolve ever new forms. The machine world reciprocates man's love by expediting his wishes and desires, namely in providing him with wealth. So we might ask, what is the contemporary updating of this sort of framework that we get here in the 60s with understanding media? And I would suggest that the question now becomes, what happens when the machine world no longer reciprocates man's love and questions his power instead? And so we get something like this from the far right. The rise of feminism has fatally coincided with the rise of video games, internet porn, and sometime in the near future, sex robots. With all these options available and the growing perils of real-world relationships, men are simply walking away. And so I find a clue in this statement, and I find a clue in this trajectory, which is that there's a misogynistic formulation of women as technological tools. Feminists are rendered an always already obsolete technology. They're obsolete technology, the women or tech that aren't working properly. So feminists are the faultiest of these technologies in an otherwise long line of technologies that have been designed for taking care of and reciprocating love in a male-dominated world. So feminists are as useful as a vacuum that have lost suction. They are as disappointing as a light that won't turn on. And men can turn to these newer technological models seemingly fit for life as secondary companions. And so the argument seems to go, if women do not want to fulfill their positions within a patriarchal society, then so be it. There will be other toys and technologies to do this work. And I wonder, is this how things are being designed? Like, if this is the idea that's sitting there, are we designing new tech, not designers in this room, but if we think of what is being designed and what is being made, it gives you pause if this is being designed with these sort of ideas in mind. So, and this extends beyond just like the tech world. This is a quote from Trump's one-time pick for labor secretary. And he's talking about the future of automation and labor and why we might want robot employees over humans. They're always polite, they always upsell, they never take a vacation, they never show up late, there's never a slip and fall, or an age, sex, race, or discrimination case. So what we can see in this formulation is feminists, anti-racist activists, factory workers, the non-normative and the non-abiding emerge as broken parts of a system precisely because of the ways their existences make obvious the structural injustices of the system. So the imagined technological future we're getting is one in which social justice is no longer a demand because all of the seemingly malfunctioning parts can be discarded and replaced. But it's also where I find hope. This idea of a contemporary socio-political economic system as broken, full of broken parts, and complaining feminists is also really exciting as feminism confronts gender's tech problem. So it seems to me that the broken machine, as it's located in the discourses, the plans, and the devices of the right and into our new technologies, also reveals a politics that might be up for grab. So I want to take it. I want to pick up this broken machine and consider it speculatively, but also as a lens and a perspective, where feminized machines can rebel and continue to refuse or reciprocate man's love at their choosing. And I want to be sort of clear on this. This is a discursive shift. It's not just like, let's all imagine we're broken machines and walk around and be broken. It's a reframing the way we think of the technological and recognizing that the way we think of the technological is super political and it matters. It matters how the world's being designed and who's devising it. And it does, like sometimes a shift in the discourse around this might be enough. So it's not like just to say walk around and be broken. or break things. You can do those things too, but this is a shift. So this is not just a thought experiment, but rather a recognition that power operates like a machine. Social injustice has a machine-like quality specifically tied, not social justice, social injustice has a machine-like quality specifically tied to reigning technologies. In other words, if the medium is indeed the message, it also offers feminism a mode of resistance by way of machine logics. So, a manifesto for the broken machine. I'll go through some of this. And I know nobody needs another manifesto, but I have one. Okay. So the general idea behind this is broken machines encapsulate the differential experience of being positioned by patriarchy as technologies that do not work properly. There are broken records, like the feminist media studies professor, and there are error messages. There are machines that leak, like dishwashers, and then there are machines that leak information. And so by co-opting the status of the broken machine and continuing the work of not working well, broken machines are powerful purveyors of mayhem and confusion. And I think of Sarah Ahmed's killjoys, Donna Haraway's cyborgs, but also McLuhan's light bulbs. In Understanding Media, McLuhan argued that no one ever notices the electric light bulb is a media until it stops working, or until it makes like it stops working, until it starts flickering. So I find it helpful to think about how technologies not only about how technologies structure power dynamics and social relations, but the reverse. How structures of power in society are themselves like technologies that need to be energized, recharged, and plugged in. So a feminism of the broken machine focuses in on and uses the logic of the machine to highlight current power dynamics that are otherwise hard to pinpoint. At the same time, the broken machine uncovers and incites new power moves. A feminism of the broken machine might allow for new perspective on dominant and familiar gender struggles. And that's the point I want to focus in with you right now on some concrete examples, like how can we take current gender struggles, which the discourses we're pretty aware of already, and how can we re-articulate them and or how can we understand them through the logic of the broken machine? So for example, my first example, people are already information in the context of the distribution of justice. It isn't that justice is unevenly distributed and received in a way that creates hierarchies. We have this idea that justice is something that you hand out. Instead, justice is what is determined when people are treated like legible information. They're categorized, they're sorted, they're filed, they're removed, retrieved, saved, and deleted. And so this idea is important to me, this idea of people as information, people as files, when it comes to popular discussions of representation and diversity. The presence of women in the institution. You all know these debates, like when people are trying to even out their panels or their boardrooms and they're like trying to get the gender and diversity quotient right. This is a common issue. But to me, what's interesting, if we reframe this through the broken machine, then we have to recognize that the status of the file appears again. The institutional practice, this is file retrieval. This isn't gender and diversity, this is file retrieval. It's an easy way of covering up larger systemic issues. So the race, what I call the gendered and raced roll call currently going on, where businesses, faculties, panels, advisory boards, and executives convene in conference in a frantic wave of inclusion. Did we get one? Do we have one on this panel? Women and diverse people are treated like files, retrieved in order to be present at the table, to represent. If we take a second common one, this is an example of mansplaining, but let's run it through the machine logics of power. So mansplaining isn't just annoying and boring when men talk over women. It is those things, but that's not the thing. It's instead that as storage devices for great amounts of his information, all of the repositories of this information simply have no more file space. So, and I'm pointing this out because how do we respond to something like this? Mansplaining is not a current annoyance solved through taking one's turn at the mic or not speaking. Rather, it is a contemporary form of taking up space and draining others of capacity. So it's not just about like talking over the mansplaining man or womansplaining, if that's like an actual thing, but the idea is what do we do about the fact that the issue is about space being taken and being drained of capacity? Another common example. Perhaps what is shocking about Me Too, and this is shocking, but it's not just the number of women who have been assaulted, a truth most women actually already know and have little in the way to share in terms of shock. Instead, the power of Me Too, if we think about it through this logic of the broken machine, was that it revealed that this whole time, perpetrators of sexual violence really didn't think their women, as machines in relatively good working order, would talk amongst themselves or against them, or turn against them. So what greater threat to an abuser than to learn that women talk to other women, that victims would talk to other victims, or in other words, that machines talk to other machines. So you can hear the haunting sound of the ominous machines. The sound of the true new machine learning went something like this: me too, me too, me too. All the while, the feminist roll call for more women in tech continues unabated, while big data's new romance with all the mechanical toys out there seem to have already addressed this. So this is the discourse that dominates. More women in tech, more women in tech. But you might argue that women are already in tech. They are quite literally in the technology as the new technology. So sex robots are like souped up and motorized store window mannequins which further normalize unrealistic standards of beauty, objectify women. We know this whole line of argument. This doesn't seem to be the issue. We have apps that are doing the work of maternal care. Most of the apps that we have today for the gig economy rely on things like providing laundry, meals, and driving, just like Mummy. And then we have a full range of assisted devices that all take on women's voices and names. Together they sound like an American rush roll call for the same sorority house. Alexa, Cortana, Erica, and Siri are all here. They've all arrived onto the scene to take care of the small things. Yet the arrival of these things on the scene actually makes clear that, no, you can't have that picture yet. Yet the arrival of these things on the scene makes clear that women as a category universalized under patriarchy and most other subjects under racialized capitalism are understood already as technologies. So women, people of color as broken machines are actually not compatible with this larger system of new technologies. And broken machines do not see themselves extended in the new technologies. Like, I don't think women are walking around worrying necessarily that they see themselves in the sex robot or that they're being replaced. This is a labor issue too, but that's another thing. But if we actually felt like we were being replaced by Alexa and Erica, Cortana and Siri, then you would have more disputes with Alexa. No, Alexa, please let me do that. They are not so worried about how technologies are gendered or if assistive devices are female or if sex robots do not come in diverse shapes and sizes. Broken machines are not interested in representation. So a feminism of the broken machine does not pretend to flee the scene. And by fleeing the scene, I mean the answer to all this isn't more self-care and it isn't more repair. The idea is not to be plugged back into patriarchy's technological conditions of possibility. So a feminism of the broken machine has capacity. It is tired, but it is not always drained of energy because it does not opt to be recharged at the same station that created it. So this is no longer an option. She refuses to use the batteries they're selling us, all the Fitbits, Foodora apps, or Uber rides. Broken machines have capacity for others when others are drained because it returns to communal care and not the original source of power that is simultaneously draining. Thus, convenience and time-saving and reveling in the new novel temporal modes of new technologies is a techno-capitalist and patriarchal ploy, and the broken machine knows this. Broken machines are into coalitions and therefore recognize the division of labor within feminist struggle. The division of labor is capacity building and guaranteeing that a singular demand to cover all bases simultaneously is not necessarily possible. So I'm going to conclude with these ideas for a minute. Being challenged by the machine world is one of the patriarchs and white male sovereigns' deepest fear. And this is why broken machines have enduring power and potential. We must begin with the premise and knowledge that new technologies will not just simply redistribute power equitably within already established hierarchies of difference. The idea that they will, that there's a technological solution for all of this, is the stuff of utopian naivety, or what we might refer to as the type of technological determinism that got us here to begin with. So the broken machine is not to be understood as a new technology. It is not an upgrade to an older model. It's not a feminist design solution. The broken machine has already begun to redistribute power, and that is why patriarchy imagines they need to be replaced. Like the flickering light bulb when the power is about to go out, it signals the end of business as usual. And so one of the biggest dreams I have about co-opting the status, this is a dream, is a future where it is no longer just a privilege to be able to not compute. And for this, I mean the ability to respond to misogyny with an error message or a failed delivery. So this is the dream part of the broken machine, because it's just, it's not possible. So the line between, so this is also recognizing that the broken machine is a differential idea. It's not just like, let's all refuse and not compute. It's not possible. The line between a broken record and an error message is long and unequally dispersed. I have watched in awe as some people respond with a failed delivery message, and have witnessed others punished for their inability to compute. And then at the same time, we're witnessing that there's a new market for disconnection, repair, and what we might call the new life-changing art of not giving a fuck. But I suspect, much like the cyborg who would rather not be a goddess, the broken machine would rather refuse to be a resigned, broken-down machine reading a self-help book about not giving two fucks, and instead would rather, the broken-down machine instead would rather continue to do the work of not working so well. Thank you.